I'm sorry, sir. We're completely booked tonight. Welcome to the Ashford Grand. Do you have a reservation with us this evening?
No, we're walk-ins.
Why are you making us leave? Isn't it their job to help people?
Escort them out!
Daddy, do we have to go?
Not tonight. We're not going anywhere tonight. Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry you were kept waiting. This is Elijah Carter, founder of...
Thanks for watching. Follow A Brighter Destiny for more powerful stories, and don't forget to subscribe.
If you have ever walked into a room and felt someone decide who you were before you said a single word, this story is for you. Stay until the end. Elijah Carter stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Ashford Grand at 11:52 p.m. on a Thursday in late October, his daughter asleep against his shoulder, her small fingers curled around the frayed ear of a stuffed rabbit named Pepper. His flight, Delta 2214 out of Denver, had been delayed 2 hours and 11 minutes on the tarmac. His jeans were the same ones he'd worn since 6 that morning. His gray zip-up hoodie had a small coffee stain near the collar that he hadn't noticed until the cabin lights came up somewhere over Nebraska. He was tired in the specific way a father gets tired, the kind that lives behind the eyes and doesn't fully leave until the child is safe and asleep somewhere soft. He had built this hotel, not metaphorically, not as an investor with a stake buried in a spreadsheet. He had walked this exact stretch of Georgia red clay in 2009 with a surveyor and a thermos of gas station coffee, before there was a lobby, before there was a fountain out front, before there was anything here but a chain-link fence and a for sale sign leaning sideways in the wind. 11 years, 340 employees across 4 properties. And tonight, none of that mattered to the man behind the front desk, because none of that was visible. What was visible was a hoodie, a sleeping 8-year-old, and no luggage that announced anything at all. His daughter, Nora, stirred against his neck, but did not wake. She had her mother's habit of faintly in her sleep, 3 notes, over and over, a private song nobody had ever been able to name. The front desk clerk was a young man named Tyler Voss, mid-20s, uniform pressed with the kind of precision that suggested he'd ironed it himself twice. His name tag sat crooked by exactly 4 degrees. He looked up from his monitor, and Elijah watched something in his face recalibrate. Not cruelty exactly. Something quieter and more automatic than cruelty, the small private arithmetic some people do without ever admitting they're doing it. Evening, Elijah said. 1 room, king bed if you've got it. We just got in. Tyler's eyes moved from the hoodie to the sleeping child to the empty space where luggage should have been and back to his screen. 3 full seconds passed before he spoke. I'm sorry, sir. We're completely booked tonight. Elijah didn't argue. He simply asked evenly, nothing at all. Not even a standard room. We're not picky. We just need somewhere to sleep. Fully booked, Tyler repeated, the phrase arriving smooth and rehearsed, like a hallway light switch flipped 1,000 times before. There's a Holiday Inn about 6 minutes east on Cobb Parkway. I can call ahead for you if you'd like. Here's the thing about a lie told with total confidence, it rarely survives more than 4 minutes. At 11:57 p.m., the revolving door spun again. A couple walked in wearing the loose, unhurried posture of people who have never once been told no. The man wore a navy blazer that fit like it had been tailored the week before. The woman's coat alone likely cost more than Tyler's monthly paycheck. Tyler's spine straightened. His voice climbed half an octave into something warm and immediate. Welcome to the Ashford Grand. Do you have a reservation with us this evening? They did not. They were walk-ins, exactly like Elijah. But within 3 minutes and 40 seconds, Tyler had run a card, printed 2 key cards, and was gesturing toward the elevator bank with the easy, practiced charm of a man who had never once questioned whether this room existed. Elijah watched every second of it without moving. Nora's breath was warm and steady against his neck. He said nothing, because he didn't need to. Both men at that counter understood exactly what had happened, even if only one of them was willing to admit it. Now, before we go further, ask yourself something. How many times have you watched a room get handed to someone else while you were told there was nothing left? I'd like to speak to your manager, Elijah said quietly, once the couple had moved off toward the elevators. Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He picked up the desk phone. The manager on duty arrived in under 90 seconds, a stocky man in his late 40s named Gregory Hale, silver at the temples, a suit jacket buttoned at midnight for reasons that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with the appearance of control. He had clearly been briefed on his walk from the back office because he arrived already certain of the story, already certain he was right, and Elijah had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous kind of man in any building is the one who has decided the outcome before he's heard a single fact. "Sir," Gregory said, positioning himself beside Tyler in a way that turned two men into a wall. "I understand there's some confusion. My staff has already explained we have no availability." "There's no confusion," Elijah said. "I watched your staff turn away a walk-in family and then book a room for a walk-in couple 4 minutes later. I'd like you to explain that." Gregory's face hardened the particular way a man's face hardens when his authority is questioned by someone he has already filed away as beneath the conversation. "My staff exercised their professional judgment. I stand behind it fully." Something old and quiet settled into Elijah's chest, not anger. Something with more patience in it than anger. He thought briefly of his own father 22 years on the night security desk of a hotel in Macon, Georgia, coming home at dawn to sit at the kitchen table in silence before he could find his way back into himself. His father had never called it bitterness, he'd called it clarity. The way a place treats the people it assumes don't matter tells you everything you'll ever need to know about it. Elijah did not reveal himself, not yet. He needed to see exactly how far this would go. Because if this was happening in his flagship property, the one built to set the standard for every location after it, then he needed the full shape of the rot before he cut it out. "Your full name and title, please, for the record." Gregory gave both without an ounce of warmth in his voice. Elijah stepped back, found a chair in the lobby, and settled Nora against him to wait for whatever came next. He did not have to wait long. Gregory did not return to the back office. He stationed himself near the front desk, arms folded, checking the lobby every 90 seconds or so the way a man checks a stove burner he's certain he left on. Each time his eyes carried the same silent message: "You are still here, and I would prefer you weren't." A woman at the lounge bar had gone quiet, without watching. Near the concierge desk, a young employee named Danielle Ruiz kept her eyes fixed on a clipboard she hadn't actually looked at in over 4 minutes, her hands frozen mid-motion. The lobby had developed the specific kind of tension that forms since several people sense something wrong is happening, and each privately states it isn't their place to be the one who says so first. At 12:14 a.m., Gregory crossed the floor and stopped a few feet from Elijah's chair, his voice lowered into that particular register designed to sound discreet while still carrying to every corner of the room. "Sir, I've given you some time, and I want to be straightforward. This is private property. We've informed you there's no availability, and continuing to occupy this lobby isn't something we're going to allow." "I'm sitting in a chair," Elijah said. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't disturbed a single guest. You don't have grounds to ask me to leave, and we both know it." "I'm not asking," Gregory said. He gave a short nod toward the far end of the lobby, and 2 security officers who had clearly been waiting for exactly this cue moved into position on either side of Elijah's chair, heavy and practiced, a maneuver they had run before. That was the exact moment Nora woke up. She surfaced the way children do not gradually, but all at once, blinking into the low gold light of the lobby, taking in the 2 large men, the tightness in her father's shoulders, and Gregory's expression in a single sweeping glance. She sat up straighter, gripping Pepper the rabbit against her chest, and looked directly at the manager with the plain, unguarded curiosity of someone who hasn't yet learned to pretend she doesn't see what she sees. "Why are you making us leave?" she asked. Her voice was clear, unhurried, and carried further than she probably intended, reaching the couple by the elevators, the woman at the bar, Danielle at the concierge desk. Gregory did not answer her. He looked instead at her father, which was its own kind of answer. Nora considered this with the slow, methodical patience of an 8-year-old working through a math problem that refuses to make sense. "If they don't want us here," she said, "why do they work here? Isn't their job to help people?" There was no accusation in the question. That was exactly why it landed so hard. The couple by the elevators had fully turned now. One of the security officers shifted his weight, visibly uncomfortable with the ground he was standing on. Danielle had gone completely still, her hands flat against the counter, her eyes fixed on a point that wasn't really there. Elijah looked down at his daughter and kept his voice even and warm, the way he always did when he wanted her to know the world's disorder was never her fault to carry. You didn't do a thing wrong, baby. Not one thing. Then he stood, keeping her close, and looked back at Gregory, a man whose certainty had just cracked slightly under an audience he hadn't wanted and who responded to that crack the only way men like him ever do. He tightened his grip. "This has gone on long enough," Gregory said, all pretense of hospitality gone from his voice. "Escort them out." Phones had begun to appear around the lobby, not held up, not performative, just angled quietly in the right direction. A father in a gray hoodie, an 8-year-old with a stuffed rabbit, 2 security guards, a manager whose face had already decided how this would end. Elijah reached into his hoodie pocket, found a number, and made a call that lasted 51 seconds. 4 sentences out, roughly 10 seconds of listening. Then he hung up, put the phone away, and rested a hand on Nora's shoulder. "Daddy," she whispered, just for him, "do we have to go?" "Not tonight," he said. "We're not going anywhere tonight." Gregory stepped forward, patience fully spent. "Sir, I am telling you for the last." The elevator chimed. It was a small, ordinary sound the lobby made dozens of times a night without anyone noticing. Every person in the room noticed this one. The doors opened and Walter Briggs stepped out, silver-haired, dark suit hastily straightened, chief executive of Carter Hospitality Group. 2 members of the executive team flanked him, moving with the barely contained urgency of men who understood exactly what they were walking into. Walter crossed the lobby directly to Elijah. He didn't look at Gregory. He didn't look at Tyler. He looked at the man in the gray hoodie the way you look at someone you've just realized you failed, and he stopped in front of him and said, with a formality that carried real weight behind it, "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry you were kept waiting." The lobby went silent, the way rooms actually go silent in real life, not all once, but one sound dying over another, until nothing remained but the faint jazz drifting from the bar, which suddenly felt entirely wrong for the moment. Walter turned to face the front desk directly. "This is Elijah Carter," he said, "founder and sole owner of Carter Hospitality Group. He owns this building. He owns the chairs you're standing beside, and the uniforms you're wearing and the paychecks that decide whether either of you works here tomorrow." He let that sit for exactly one breath before adding, "I want everyone in this lobby to understand precisely what happened here tonight." Tyler had gone the color of the marble counter beneath his hands. Gregory hadn't moved, standing frozen in the middle of the floor, a man whose entire understanding of the situation had just been rebuilt from the ground up with no idea yet what to do inside the new version of it. Nora tugged Pepper tighter and leaned into her father's side. "Daddy," she whispered, "you know this man." For the first time since they'd walked through those revolving doors, something in Elijah's face fully softened. "Yeah, baby," he said, "I know this man. Now here's where the story could have ended. A reveal, an apology, a room finally handed over." But Elijah Carter had built 4 hotels on one belief his father drilled into him at a kitchen table in Macon, that the moment you stop checking what happens after the cameras leave is the moment you've already lost the thing you built. So instead of walking away, he asked Walter for 1 more hour. Word travels fast inside a building at 1 in the morning. By 1:40 a.m., 3 people had quietly asked to speak with him in the manager's office. Once word spread through the staff group chat that Gregory Hale had finally been caught the way half the building had hoped he would be for over a year. The first was Danielle Ruiz, the concierge who'd frozen at her desk. She told Elijah, hands still shaking slightly, that 4 months earlier she'd been written up by Gregory for unprofessional appearance the week she came back from unpaid leave after a miscarriage, because she'd asked to swap a 12-hour shift for an 8-hour one, and he'd called the request an attitude problem. The second was Marcus Odell, a maintenance technician who'd worked at the Ashford Grand for 6 years. He said Gregory routinely denied him his contractually required breaks, then marked him as a no-show on the DH them anyway, docking his pay twice in the past year alone, a total of $481 he'd never gotten back. The third was an elderly guest named Ruth Ellery, a widow in her 70s, who happened to still be in the lobby bar finishing a late glass of wine when the whole scene had unfolded. She told Elijah, unprompted, that 8 months earlier, Gregory had refused to let her use a wheelchair-accessible room she'd reserved weeks in advance, telling her the room had been reassigned the same night she'd watched him hand a similar room to a younger couple without so much as a reservation number. 3 stories, 3 separate months. One pattern repeating itself in a building Elijah had built specifically to end that pattern. He listened to every word without interrupting. He didn't need to build a case. The case had already built itself over months, quietly, in a building where nobody with the power to stop it had been paying attention until tonight forced the issue into the light. At 2:05 a.m., Elijah walked back into the lobby, where Gregory was still standing near the front desk, jacket buttoned, jaw set, waiting to see if there was still a version of tonight where he came out on top. "You're right that you didn't know who I was," Elijah told him, his voice carrying easily now across a lobby gone completely still. "That was never the point. Everything you did tonight, you did because you looked at me and decided I wasn't worth your standard, not because of anything I said or did, but because of what I looked like walking through that door. And you did it in front of my daughter." Gregory opened his mouth. Something like an explanation started to come out. "Mr. Carter, I want you to understand the circumstances," and ran out of road before it reached a period, the way every sentence he'd tried since Walter's arrival kept running out of road. "I already know the circumstances," Elijah said. "I just spent 40 minutes hearing about 3 more of them set." He named Danielle. He named Marcus Odell. He named Ruth Ellery. With every name, something in Gregory's face lost a little more color. Because a man who has built his authority on nobody ever comparing notes discovers all at once exactly how fragile that authority always was. "Richard," Walter started to say, catching himself, correcting to the right name. "Gregory, this is done. Tonight and everything before it." Gregory straightened his jacket, the small automatic gesture of a man trying to hold on to the one intact thing he had left, and said quietly to himself, "I was maintaining a standard, not an apology, not even close to one." He said it again, lower as he was walked toward the back office, a man who would go to his grave believing he'd been the only person in that lobby doing his job correctly. Tyler was next. Elijah crossed to the front desk and let a long moment pass before speaking, giving the younger man time to understand what was coming. "You made a decision tonight based on how someone looked," Elijah said, not unkindly. "I need you to sit with that, not with what it costs you here, but with what it actually means to be on the other side of it. I'm not ending your career tonight, but you're going into retraining, and it isn't going to be about hospitality scripts. It's going to be about who this work is actually for. If you come out the other side and still want to be here, the door's open. But nothing like tonight happens again, not to anyone." Tyler nodded, and it was small, but it was real. Elijah walked to the concierge desk last and kept his voice low, meant only for Danielle. "You saw it happening tonight. You've clearly been seeing it happen for months. I understand why the structure here made it hard to say anything. And that's a failure of leadership, not of your character." He paused. "Starting Monday, you're moving into a supervisory role in guest services, with back pay corrected for the write-up that never should have happened. I need people in this building who notice the line in a position where they can actually act on it." Danielle's expression moved through several things before it settled somewhere between relief and resolve. "I won't let you down," she said. "I know," Elijah said simply. He turned to face the small crowd still lingering in the lobby guests, staff, a security officer who hadn't moved in several minutes. No phones raised now, just people waiting to hear what came next. "I've been building hotels a long time," he said, "and there's exactly one standard I've never negotiated on. Every person who walks through these doors gets treated with respect, not based on what they're wearing, not based on what they look like, not based on whether they seem like they belong in a place like this. Every person, every time, no exceptions." He looked around the room once more, at the marble floor his own father had never once been allowed to walk across as anything but an employee. "If anyone here can't commit to that, I'd genuinely rather you find somewhere else to work." Not as a threat, just as the truth of what this place is. The words settled into the room for a moment. Then Nora, who'd been standing quietly beside her father through all of it, with Pepper tucked under one arm, tugged once on his hand. "Daddy," she said, "can we please get our room now? I'm really tired." It moved through the lobby like something finally released, not quite laughter, but close enough to it. The sound a group of peoples makes when tension finally finds somewhere to go. Even Walter pressed his lips together against a smile. Elijah looked down at his daughter's earnest, tired face and felt whatever had been sitting in his chest all night finally shift, not disappear, just move into something with more room in it. "Yeah, baby," he said. "We're getting our room." 3 months later, on a slow Tuesday afternoon, a family of 4 came through the revolving doors of the Ashford Grand, 2 parents in travel-worn clothes, 2 kids trailing behind, one of them dragging an oversized backpack and refusing every offer of help with a fierce conviction of a child who has decided this is a matter of principle. Danielle met them before they even reached the desk. She introduced herself by name, asked how she could make the stay easier, and never once glanced at their shoes or their luggage. Within 2 minutes, the parents' shoulders had come down. Within 5, the kid with the backpack had let someone finally carry it. In the corner of the lobby, Elijah stood with Nora beside him, in for a scheduled visit this time, wearing a jacket instead of a hoodie, though Nora had, of course, insisted on bringing Pepper. He hadn't announced himself to the floor yet. He wanted to watch this first. The ordinary, everyday version of the thing he'd spent 11 years trying to build. Nora watched Danielle guide the family toward the desk, watched the kids light up at something she said, then looked up at her father. "Is that what it's supposed to look like?" Elijah watched the tired parents finally relax, watched the kid let go of his backpack. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly what it's supposed to look like." Nora nodded once, tucked Pepper back under her arm, and reached up for her father's hand. They stood together in the corner of the lobby he'd built, watching it finally become what he'd always meant it to be. Every person deserves dignity before they've proven a single thing, before they show you what they have, before you decide whether they belong. That isn't just good business, that's just what's right. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe and stick around, because the next one might just be someone you know. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.